We know life is busy. That's why saving money should be effortless. With Atlantic Union Bank's Roundup Savings, every time you use your debit card, your purchase rounds up to the nearest dollar and automatically goes into savings. So whether you're grabbing coffee, filling the tank, or picking up groceries, you're saving without even thinking about it. It's just one of the ways Atlantic Union Bank makes managing your money easy. Learn more at atlanticunionbank.com or stop by a branch today. Atlantic Union Bank. Any way you bank.
For my family, I'm always at my best. That's why I also want the best in my kitchen. And that means only Eggland's Best Eggs. They're always so fresh tasting and delicious. With 6 times more vitamin D, 10 times more vitamin E, and 25% less saturated fat than ordinary eggs. So why give your family less when they can have the best? Eggland's Best. Better taste, better nutrition, better eggs. For added convenience, look for our hard-cooked peeled eggs.
Before Danny O'Connor realized his dreams of becoming an Olympic boxer, his first love was found on the thick foam of a high school wrestling mat. At 14, O'Connor quickly realized the name of the game: fit into the lightest weight class possible while staying strong enough to win. His body became a tool to manipulate. He'd pair days of fasting with long runs clad in plastic trash bags to make him sweat more. At night, O'Connor's pajamas consisted of a sauna suit under his winter tracksuit. Then he'd spit into an empty Gatorade bottle to help shed any extra water weight. Some nights, he'd lose up to 6 pounds. These methods evolved to be even more extreme as O'Connor's path shifted to professional boxing.
I had this ability to control, I was going to do the things with extreme discipline to make a weight class. And then when I was in between camps, I would go the opposite way. And for everything I took off, I put on. And so it was a really unhealthy lifestyle of up and down, these really, really high peaks and low valleys of my weight and everything that went into making the weight class. But I could always stop it. I could always control it when I had to go into training camp to make a weight, or, I had another fight lined up.
The incredible discipline O'Connor showed during training went out the window as soon as the fight was over. He'd become a black hole, consuming any and all food in his path. Though it made cutting weight more difficult, O'Connor just accepted his all-consuming urge to eat as another part of life. He didn't realize that there was a name for this experience: his need to eat everything in his house, then drive to the grocery store for more. The urge to keep eating even when he was hours past the point of feeling hungry. To have his body purge all the food it couldn't handle only to be filled back up as soon as the vomiting was over. O'Connor had binge eating disorder.
So I knew it wasn't hunger. I knew what a hunger cue was back then, but this urge manifested, and it always started with the urge. And that was the most trouble. It was all parts of my being just had to eat. And so it didn't matter. It didn't matter anything. It didn't matter what I was telling myself. It didn't matter what my body felt for hunger. It didn't matter any of the stuff. And so that's how it started for me. And once I gave into that urge, then the binge would just be off and running. And those things were crazy. I mean, it could be 2 hours, it could be 4 days, it could be 2 days, it could be a couple hours.
As O'Connor writes in his new memoir, Weight Class: A Fighter's Life or Death Battle with an Eating Disorder, there was no telling when the binge would let him go. He was always an unwilling passenger inside his own body. The amount of food he ate didn't matter, and the eating disorder didn't care if his body had reached its physical limit. O'Connor would eat until the urges were gone. The binges were sporadic. Sometimes O'Connor would go months without an episode. Other times it was a nightly battle.
I couldn't wrap my head around the fact that every day this urge showed up and just took all my power, and I was just lost. I still can't wrap my head around that something that you can't even see has so much power over me.
A common question people ask when talking about binge eating is, why don't you just leave your house? And it's a reasonable question for someone who's never had this eating disorder.
Listen, I've ran literally miles and miles and miles until I couldn't even barely walk anymore because I just didn't want to go home and give into the urge, which eventually I just went home and gave into it. So it's not delaying tactics or what I call them, or avoidance tactics. I've tried a million of them. Let me go to the gym. Let me, clean the dishes. Let me do whatever. Sometimes you can avoid it, you might get away with it, but without doing the real work of what's going on, it's just avoidance or delay. And eventually it comes back, in my opinion.
Another common misconception is that the urge to binge is the same as feeling hungry. O'Connor knew he wasn't hungry, but would still force down whole pizzas, jars of peanut butter, and sleeves of rice cakes. Sometimes he could combat the urge by slowly eating frozen petite peas, but more often than not, the eating disorder would take over. Once he was back in control, O'Connor would starve himself out of both shame and fear of what eating even more would do to his body. But the constant cycle of binging and starving eventually caught up with him.
I literally felt like I broke myself. One day I had so much control over manipulating food, of how much I eat at exactly what time, anytime, all day. And then I went to feeling like I broke myself and the button was just pressed on, like all you're going to do is just eat. And I always had this urge. It always started with an urge. And it wasn't like I'm hungry, right? Like, first of all, I don't have any food cues anymore. They don't work. They haven't in years. The professionals say that they could come back, but they don't, because I've went against them for so many years. So I don't really know when I'm hungry or not hungry yet.
It was the first fight O'Connor had no idea how to win. It was an opponent he was wholly unprepared for. He never even thought men could have eating disorders.
When I was telling all aspects of my being was saying, stop this, and I still couldn't. My actions didn't meet my demands. It baffled my mind, because I know I don't have a lot of control on a lot of things in this world. But when I tell my able body to stand up and go walk across the room, I do that. And so as an athlete, I'm telling myself to perform all day long at high levels, and I'm training myself to perform. So when I'm telling myself not to do something, that's essentially ruining my career and putting my life in jeopardy, because eventually it became a health risk. And even with the health risk as what was at stake, still I couldn't control this stuff. I was baffled, beyond willpower. You know what I mean? It didn't matter how much I wanted it or tried to force it or willed it to be different.
The realization came in 2013, though he'd been suffering for much longer. O'Connor was set to headline as the main event at the Boston Garden Arena, a dream fight. By this time, he was a pro at quickly dropping weight during training camp, but the binging had evolved into a monster he couldn't rein back in. O'Connor couldn't trust himself around food, so he refused to eat for 2 weeks before the fight. But as he dragged his body onto the scale at weigh-ins, he was 6 pounds over. When the same thing happened with his next fight, it was clear the eating disorder was no longer something O'Connor could manage in secret.
At that time, I couldn't do the sport of boxing and understanding the eating disorder at the same time, so I stepped away from the sport. So I stepped away. In boxing, there's no seasons. Nobody needed to, I didn't have to answer to anybody. I just took my time away so I could still keep my secret. And at that time, I thought it was a mental thing. I thought I'm going to beat this thing overnight. I'm going to come back to the sport and I'm going to be back at it. And man, I was extremely naive, and the eating disorder humbled me.
As he'd later find out, 2013 was just the beginning of a long journey full of progress, relapses, and brushes with death. Join us next week as O'Connor details his battle to overcome binge eating disorder and how he's making male eating disorders more visible. O'Connor's book, Weight Class, is available now wherever books are sold. You can find more information about Danny O'Connor and all of our guests on our website, ingoodhealthpodcast.org. For more behind the scenes, follow In Good Health Pod on Facebook, Instagram, and X. Our writer-producer is Kristen Farra. Our production manager is Jason Dickey. I'm Greg Johnson.
Tires matter. They're the only part of your vehicle that touches the road. Tread confidently with new tires from Tire Rack. Whether you're looking for expert recommendations or know exactly what you want, Tire Rack makes it easy. Fast, free shipping, free road hazard protection, and convenient installation options. Go to TireRack.com to see tire test results, tire ratings, and consumer reviews, and be sure to check out all the special offers. TireRack.com, the way tire buying should be.
From small towns to big cities, Comcast is connecting millions of Americans to affordable, reliable, and secure Wi-Fi at prices that are clear and consistent with the new 5-year price guarantee. Backed by AI innovation, resilient design, and cybersecurity technology, the Comcast network is built to keep families and businesses connected and their data safe. Learn more about how Comcast is investing in a more connected America at ComcastCorporation.com/investment.
Listen, we've seen what's out there for patio furniture, and what you've been paying is outrageous. But that was last season before you ditched the specialty stores and started saving more at HomeSense. Now you're listening to this while under a designer umbrella on a luxurious teak lounge chair, because it's easy to relax when you refuse to settle on style, on price, on outdoor pieces that will actually outlast the season. HomeSense, the home of no compromise, part of the Home Goods family.